Let's talk about India. It's a place of just incredible energy, so much color, and deep complexity. But if you look just a little bit closer, you start to see these deep, almost impossible contradictions that somehow, well, they just function. So in this explainer, we're going to dive into a fascinating text called Functional Discord to try and understand the architecture behind these very unique paradoxes. Okay, let's just jump right in with a big one. On one hand, you've got a society where religion is absolutely everywhere. I mean, it's in public spaces, it's in politics, it's woven into daily life. It is this massive, visible force. And yet, on the other hand, corruption is often just a routine part of getting things done. It's almost expected. So the question is, how on earth do these two realities exist right next to each other every single day? And believe me, it doesn't stop there. Take a look at the law. India often has some of the most stringent laws you can find anywhere on the books, right? With really severe penalties for all sorts of offenses. But then, you step out into the street, and in daily life, rules are often treated as, well, optional, kind of like suggestions, not commands. It creates this huge, fascinating gap between what the law says and what people actually do. And here's one more to really frame the puzzle for us: the family. It's held up as this sacred institution, the absolute bedrock of society. But then you look at the actual data, and you find these persistent, really troubling rates of domestic violence. So the structure itself is honored, but the well-being of the people inside that structure, well, that can be a totally different story. So what is going on here? Is this all just moral failure? Is it hypocrisy on some kind of massive scale? Well, the source we're looking at today argues at something much, much deeper, something more structural. It asks the central question: why is India a land of functional paradoxes? And that word functional, that's the key to the whole thing.
And here it is. This is the core theory. The source calls this phenomenon functional discord. The big idea is that these aren't just simple contradictions or failures. No, they are societal adaptations. They're coping mechanisms that have evolved over time to deal with systems, whether that's government, legal, or social, that are just deeply, deeply inconsistent.
So how does this adaptation actually work? Well, the crucial point is this. When a system consistently fails to deliver real results, things like safety, justice, or just basic efficiency, the society starts to substitute symbols for substance. It becomes what the source calls governance by theater.
Let's break down why symbols are so seductive. As you can see, they're incredibly efficient. You can signal your good intentions with a brand new law without ever having to actually fund its enforcement. You can create this great feeling of emotional satisfaction, like a sense of moral purity or national pride, with just a slogan, and you get to skip all the hard work of actual reform. It's a shortcut that gives you moral cover, but doesn't actually change a thing.
All right, let's apply this theory to a real-world example. And here's a provocative one. Why would a society ban pornography, a symbolic act of moral control, while at the very same time having one of the world's highest population growth rates? How does that work? See, when you look at it through the governance by theater lens, it suddenly makes a kind of sense. The focus isn't on the real-world outcome of, say, sexual health or family planning. Nope. The focus is on the symbol of moral purity. By prioritizing the appearance of control and enforcing silence, you replace actual education. And as the source points out, when you suppress conversation, you're not actually suppressing the behavior. You're just suppressing any sense of responsibility for it. Okay, let's apply this lens to that second paradox we started with. We have religion as this constant public presence, but at the same time, a widespread lack of ethical consistency in so many parts of public and private life. How does functional discord explain this one? This slide just illustrates the concept perfectly. Religion becomes this incredibly powerful symbol of identity and social belonging. Its practice becomes externalized. It's all about the public displays, the festivals, the rituals. So accountability for your actions gets outsourced to these rituals rather than being an internal compass for your daily behavior. Faith keeps all its social power, but it loses some of its real moral force. And for our final case study, here's one you can literally see on any street corner. There's this intense, loud, very emotional patriotism. You see the flags, you hear the slogans and the anthems, and yet public spaces, parks, roads, rivers are often just treated with neglect, covered in litter, and abused. Why the massive disconnect? And once again, it's the triumph of the symbol
Patriotism gets defined as an emotional display, right? It's a feeling you have, not a civic duty you perform. The act of loving your country becomes about defending its image against any critics, instead of the much harder, much less glamorous work of actually serving it through care, discipline, and, keeping it clean.
So, pulling it all together, the source argues these paradoxes aren't just mistakes or accidents, they're functional. They are the pressure release valves that let a society cope with the immense strain of having weak institutions and what it calls an unfinished modernity. They allow for that emotional release without demanding any actual, difficult systemic reform.
But, and this is a huge but, this system of coping comes at a very, very high cost. Living in a constant state of contradiction is exhausting. It creates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, a sense of moral fatigue, and just widespread cynicism. People stop expecting things to make sense. They just learn to navigate the paradoxes instead of trying to solve them, which leads to this kind of quiet disengagement.
All right, so if that's a diagnosis, what's the path forward? Is there a cure? The source offers what it calls a lens for repair, and it's all about making this fundamental shift away from a symbolic order toward a truly functional one. In this slide right here gets to the absolute core of the solution. The goal isn't to somehow become more moral. It's to become more consistent. It's to align what you say with what you actually do. As you can see, the focus has to shift from valuing the symbolic signal, the ban, the slogan, the ritual, to delivering actual substance, things like safety, dignity, and predictability. And this isn't just some abstract theory. The source suggests some really concrete, adaptable steps. For instance, instead of just banning things, educate people. Instead of judging policies by their good intentions, measure their real-world outcomes. Instead of having that giant gap between law and behavior, align them with consistent enforcement. And, crucially, redefine virtue as something you do, not just something you declare. Ultimately, this explainer offers a really powerful way to reframe the whole conversation. These deep contradictions, they aren't proof that the culture has somehow failed. Instead, they're the defining evidence of a society that's in the middle of a really difficult, unfinished transition, moving from an old order based on symbols to a new one based on function. And we'll leave you with this final thought from the source. A civilization matures when it no longer needs to contradict itself to survive. In other words, the real sign of a mature, functional society isn't that it's perfect, but that it has finally aligned its values with its actions. It's a state where survival no longer depends on mastering the art of the paradox.